to another episode of OrTalk, where we explore healing and relationships, emotional awareness, Torah wisdom, and amazing, human psyche, deep layers of human experience. And I am very deeply touched by today's conversation that will unfold, God willing. I think many people quietly need to hear this conversation between Dr. Lauren and myself, because relationships and marriage are rarely simply a stay or leave kind of situation when couples find themselves in difficult spaces. There's a lot of endurance, there's a lot of questioning, there's a lot of not knowing when the conflict is part of growth versus when a relationship may just indicate that it's just not emotionally healthy for either one of the couples. And many couples today, I know myself as a mentor and practicing therapy, on my own, and certainly Dr. Lauren as well, I'm sure. We meet in today's world many couples that are emotionally exhausted, they're disconnected, they're overwhelmed, many of them even silently struggling, I want to say, because they don't know, is this a normal thing about marriage? Is it a normal conflict? Is it just an unhealthy dynamic? Did we just emotionally disconnect? Or is it something deeper? So today's conversation with Dr. Lauren Hofstatter, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a relationship coach, a college teacher, a speaker, the founder of the Orthodox Therapist. She specializes in helping individuals and couples navigate through, different areas of emotional intimacy and communication, marriage struggles, faith-based relationship dynamics within the Orthodox Jewish world. And I'm very impressed by the way that Dr. Lauren approaches, first of all, as a wife and a mother, a therapist, an active member of the Orthodox Jewish community. She seems to be able to juggle it all, and she brings a lot of professional expertise and really, I feel, lives the understanding that we're going to be talking about in these conversations. Welcome, Dr. Lauren. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Just for clarity, I do specifically work in marriage and family therapy, but I'm actually a licensed mental health counselor. It's a little different. I just don't.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for
No
clarifying.
problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we'll go straight into the questions. Why are so many marriages struggling today? I certainly see it. I know we had a little conversation before we went on air. Would you say that modern marriages today are carrying certain pressures that previous generations didn't experience in the same way? And that's why we're seeing more of this, shout out, both from women and men, about how challenging and how much they're in pain in their marriage.
So I'm not sure if it's more than it was, let's say, 25 years ago. It's definitely more accepted to talk about, though, it feels like.
Mm,
Like people, like it's something that you don't have to suffer in silence anymore with, which I think is actually good. My problem is that I've been seeing is that I also, with that being said, I am seeing people getting information from like not the world's best sources and then just like, okay, my marriage isn't working, it's disposable, I give up. Like that's also unfortunately something I'm seeing a lot of. And that's not to mean that like there are 100% situations where it's extremely unhealthy and warrants divorce. I'm not denying that.
mm,
Even after 2 weeks, I don't care. Meaning there are some situations where that could happen, and that's not you giving up on your marriage. That's legit. I'm not here to judge anybody. But what I am saying is that I have definitely noticed it's more acceptable to like search for um guidance when it comes to your marriage. I think again it's still
mm,
behind closed doors, but there are just more resources, people to call, people to talk to, etc.
right,
I don't know if that's because we have social media or because people like in my field are more open. I'm not sure.
right.
um but I see it on both ends. I see people looking for help more, but I also see people maybe like social media necessarily could be used in both directions, that like
Right.
instead of speaking to a human, they'll use like an AI to try to like
Can't
navigate their
get that.
marriage.
Can't get
And
it.
that's not right. It's not a person. You know what I mean? So
Right.
I see it in both. I definitely see it in both directions. I definitely see it becoming a little bit more acceptable, which is not necessarily bad. I think it's good that, people know, like, we're only human, guys. It's okay, you know? Um, but yeah,
Right.
that's kind of what I'm seeing.
It's so amazing, like you mentioning that AI idea, because I've had some conversation with other, mentors in the field in the Jewish Orthodox community, and we're noticing that a lot of people are turning to AI as therapy,
Hmm.
which I find very interesting. So the first thing that came to my mind was not to say that you can't go to a not Jewish therapist, but AI is not Jewish. I don't know. It just came to my mind like they're not Jewish. They're not coming from the Torah perspective, first of all, and come on, guys, like it is a computer at the end of the day. Like we're not
Right.
talking, we need, where's the human? Where's the soul? Like we want a soul projection. We're coming into therapy with our soul. We want a soul projection, right? We're not going to get that from AI. We're not, no matter how much they have you down chart, your numerology chart, your astrology chart, your history, you plunked in all the data and they got to know you because you're talking to them 24/7 instead of talking to other human beings. But it's really become too much of a reliance and a very cold projection of facts
Right.
as
For sure.
right? Do you
Sure. Yeah.
find that?
Yeah. What's actually funny you say that. I do think, in terms of some of the non-Jewish therapists, that AI might have more information about Torah than some of the non-Jewish therapists who think that, like, some of the things we do, like, even as Jews, I mean, like, even Taras Mishpacha, if you would try to explain that to somebody who has no idea what you're talking about, they'd be like, what is this radicalized, crazy religion? Like, an AI would understand. They'd be like, oh yeah, Taras Mishpacha, blah, blah, blah. Like, they would know, like, family, purity, like, they would understand that. But it's interesting you bring that up because I get that question a tremendous amount. Like, do you think it's important to have, if I'm Orthodox, to have a Jewish Orthodox therapist?
Mm,
And I really do think it's important, just because
yes,
otherwise you're spending so much of your time trying to explain to this person, like, why you do certain things. But
right.
not only that, it could very quickly become this, like, push pull between client and therapist of, like, what do you mean? Like, you can't give your husband a hug? Like, you're going through something really hard. I'm using Tara Sprache as an example, but what do you
Right.
mean? Like, you can't give your husband a hug? Well, no, like, that doesn't align with my value system. So, like, we don't do that. Yeah, but this is so sad. Like, he really needs that from you.
Yeah. A
Well, I
hundred.
can't. Or, like, how do you expect your husband to, like, um how do you expect your husband to just not do certain things for a full 2 weeks sexually? Men have needs.
Yep.
Okay, like, this is our lifestyle. So, and that's, like, very, very like, then it come even, like, Shabbos. What do you mean? Like, you can't go out, like, on a Saturday morning for, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, they don't. I mean, listen, I do think that nowadays every normal trained therapist is somewhat Jewish Orthodoxy informed, just because it's so public.
Yeah.
But again, I do think it's important because it's a huge part of your life.
Absolutely. And the Torah
Right.
values, Torah wisdom, let's go even beyond the knowledge. I want to go to Torah wisdom. Torah wisdom also teaches us certain things about the way men need to treat women and women need to treat men. And if that's not infiltrated inside the communication system between the reflection of what the therapist is giving to the couple and or one or the other, then what are we basing the ability to rehabilitate or to say goodbye on? What system, right?
Right.
Torah
Hmm.
wisdom addresses specifically, we even spoke about this concept, and I think why not introduce it here right now, this concept that the husband is the Baal, is the owner, right? So that could be misconstrued if there, if you don't have an Orthodox or someone who's at least Torah knowledgeable who understands that concept. The woman could be in a marriage and think, oh my gosh, I'm owned by my husband and I really do owe him, right? So that could be misconstrued. But if you have somebody who's familiar, who has the wisdom of Torah, she or he would be able to explain it in a different way of the relationship of what that really means, right?
Right, for sure. But I think also, and this is where we talked about we talked about this before also, where sometimes men or women are taught certain things at a young age, and it becomes, like, almost like burned into their brain. Like, this is how, like, the whole concept of a baal, like, this is how things are. Like, what do you mean? I'm the husband, you owe me, or I'm the head of the household, I'm the boss, da 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 da. We don't do things as a team. It's me and then you. It's hard as a therapist to then break that narrative for the
Yes.
person, even if you come with like, oh, I called my Rav. I have a whole book of sources for you to explain why this is not a thing. They don't care. It's almost like their cognitive distortion of what they think because it's what they've been told. And to
Right.
break a cognitive distortion is like
Right.
super difficult, especially with this type of concept.
Right. And let's go deep and personal right now at this point. A non-Orthodox therapist, or again, a therapist who's not involved in understanding Torah life, the might suggest to the husband, I'm being very raw and open here, suggest to the husband when the wife is not in the mood that he goes and, self-pleases himself.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to understand that you can't do that. Just even simple things like that, you really can't work with somebody who just doesn't get the Jewish psyche and mind and the values in our
Right.
mitzvah, Torah mitzvahs.
Right. I'll be honest with you, even within the confines of, because I have both like the clinical side and the from side. And while obviously I do not promote things that don't align with halachic values, if that's something that's important to the client,
Right.
but it's hard for me like to wrap my head around that too. When there's a situation, let's say you're 6 weeks postpartum or whatever, and your husband is struggling in that way, it's hard. It's really
Yes.
hard. It's
Yes.
actually like it would be for some women in that situation, it would be like a pressure valve released if they could like go and take care of that themselves. And again, this whole concept that like this is also a huge generalization that really bothers me as a clinician, to be honest with you, that like men are animals and like they have this thing that needs to be. It's not the truth. Like that's why a lot of guys I've had plenty of from Orthodox men I've worked with
Mm,
that don't want to do self-pleasure because it feels gross for them. Like that's not what I want. I want to be with my wife. I want to be with my partner. There is that emotional drive, need, connection similar to the way that women need it, but for some reason for men it's just not, I don't know, accept
right.
not accepted, not promoted as much. So they're just viewed as like animals and women are these delicate flowers. That's actually not necessarily the truth.
Right.
But
Right.
there's balance.
Although I've heard men themselves say, "What are we going to do? We're animals. We need it. We need it. Women
No,
need the
there are some
emotion."
guys that do that, but
Right.
but which I think is gross.
Right.
But
I also agree.
it's gross, but it's interesting. Those people, those guys that say that, I do think it's something that they were like ingrained and raised with, and it's almost like a defense mechanism that they put
Yes.
up to
Yes.
kind of for a lot of things. Sometimes it's to make excuses for bad behavior.
There you go. I agree.
That's a big one. And sometimes it's because they don't want to be vulnerable with their spouse. So they're like,
Right.
no, like, no, but you do. Like, you do need the cuddling and you do need the I love you and you do need the emotional connection. And you do need your spouse to be into it. Like, you do need that.
Right.
It's just, I don't know why, again, it's not spoken about more. And when I do speak about it, guys are like, are you like a unicorn? Like, why do you know all the secrets? I'm like, there's no secret. Like, this is just the reality. And for some reason,
Oh boy.
men, I don't know why it had to come from a woman to explain kind of like a little bit about how men, like the inside of a guy's brain. I don't know. And again, there's like percentages here. Some guys are like 85, 90% super emotional beings, and yeah, do they enjoy the physical act of intercourse or sex or whatever? Sure, but they're
Hmm.
not, they feel they're missing something the same
Yeah.
way that for a woman,
Yes.
when there's no emotional connection there, or they're not in a good place with their husband or whatever, they also feel like something's missing. Guys feel that too in a very
Right.
real way. It's just not something that's promoted or discussed, which is
Right.
interesting. I don't know why though.
I feel like if you take the mix of what has been, like you said, hardwired into the brains of many young couples when they get married, and we have to remember one thing in the Orthodox world, the Jewish Torah abiding world, right? We get married early. And there is a certain level of neuroplasticity that's still happening in the brain, right, amongst these young couples. Whereas in the secular world, the Western, larger, whatever, global community, they're getting married really more in the mid 20s,
Right.
mid,
It's starting to
mid,
push
mid,
back. It's interesting. Yeah, it's starting,
right,
which I don't think is necessarily bad. I mean,
right. 100%.
I hear why it could be, but I also feel like women are having babies in their early 40s. Like that was the whole reason people were getting married.
Right.
One of the reasons. There's other reasons too.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but I
So
don't think it's necessary. People get to know themselves a little bit better.
100%, you have to learn to love yourself in order to learn to love somebody
Right.
else. 100%, that's a real thing. And you do. You can't go and say, I'm looking for my other half when that your half is completely shattered. That also doesn't work. If we really don't come in within a certain identity, I'm working with a lot of singles now who are like in their 20s and
Thank
they're
God, by the
worried.
way. I don't know
What?
why they don't. Thank God you are, because I mean, I also work with singles sometimes, but I am such a proponent of premarital counseling. Just to
Yep.
like, even if it's like 2 or 3 sessions, just to
Right.
like sit with somebody and ask the right questions and talk to each other and learn how
Yes.
to communicate. Because again, I say this so much. Like they hand you this book of like halachos that you have to know when you get married, but they don't hand you a book on how to like navigate emotional intimacy with your husband. They don't give you
Exactly.
that.
What are
So
the red sign? Right.
I'm such a
What
proponent of that. But yeah.
Right. So I'm working with a lot of young girls, and my son works, with the young guys, and really, I'm finding like I say to them, off the table, no shidduchim, off the table. Let's go to not even self-confidence, identity confidence. Let's just know who we are. Let's just understand. Let me explain to you your triggers a little bit more, so that when husband, Mr. Dearest, comes along you'll be able to understand yourself and be able to separate and do some inner work, because there are certain triggers that with all the therapy in the world there'll still always be underpinnings of it, because that's part of tikkun, that's part of our
Mhm.
restoration, that's part of our soul's mission. What is my role? What is my restorative path? I mean, that's just part of why we're here.
Right.
But it's important to come to that place. So I'm going to ask you, what are there like flag post signs that you would suggest? And again, we can't keep this as like a, hey guys, just
Overall,
take
right.
this as a chart. It's not. But maybe help us understand, what are some of the signs that there's deeper harm that might be taking place in a marriage that would ultimately, could be saved at that point, or could be restored, or there is potential for repair, but oh my gosh, let me just pay attention to this. This is not just happening, right? What could be some of those signs?
Well, I think a lot of the issues that I see start with broken communication. When there's a
Okay.
situation where like you can't talk to your husband about certain things, or opposite, by the way. Let's say both directions. One spouse can't talk to the other about certain things, and like almost like feelings of fear start creeping in. Fear is like a very strong word, but I mean like these like uncomfortable feelings where you're like, why can't I just like sit and like discuss this with my husband without, or my wife? I'm going to use husband because I'm a woman, but
Right.
why can't I sit with my husband and like have this conversation without feeling like I'm going to not be able to have the conversation or hurt my husband? Or so that's already a red flag to me. Once you start having like a breakdown of communication, like what's going on? Like why can't we? And to me, the way that I typically work is I'm like, call it out. Like if you feel like you can't have because again, it's very easy to have a conversation when things are happy and fun and running and going, and it's when things are critical or things are
Right.
hard, that's when it's hard to have verbal communication. So
Right.
that to me is a little bit of like a we need to work on this. What's going on? So that's number one.
Okay.
Another, that's a big one for me, because I mean, once there's a significant level of emotional disconnect there, that you know what I mean. And that typically, for me, from what I've seen, starts with communication. There's also a
Right.
certain level of respect between partners. I actually hate the word respect because I'll tell you, it means different things to different people. So it gets very confusing. Like when your husband sits down and says, I don't feel respected. Okay, what does that
What is
mean? Yeah, what do you mean? What am I doing that's disrespectful? So for
right?
some guys, it's like the tone of voice
Mm.
that their wife is using. And like if you don't ever tell your wife, like, am I using that tone of voice now? How about now? Like if we don't you know what I mean? Like if we
Right.
don't ever talk about it, And it happens to be that your spouse was raised in a way where like they grew up in a quiet house where no one ever screamed and everyone was quiet. And like those are things that if they're never discussed can really cause a significant rift in a marriage. If it's never discussed that like let's say I'm sure you know about like the love languages, that type of thing.
Yes.
So let's say your husband's love language is acts of service. Fine. And he appreciates so much when you prepare his plate of supper. That's all he needs. But if you've never talked, I mean, whatever, for some people it's a big deal. I'm making it like it's not. It's a big deal,
Right.
guys. I'm just saying. People that work full time or have a lot of kids or etc., it is a very big deal to do that for your spouse. But if he never expressed that, are you supposed to mind read? Like that also is where rifts come in marriages, where even if you're married, like let's say for me, I'm married for 20 years, almost a couple days away. There are times where like on both ends, like I'm expecting my husband to just know what I'm thinking, and he's expecting me sometimes to just know what he's thinking, and then we'll look at each other and be like, "What the heck are we doing? Like, how are we supposed to know?
Right. If
How am I
nobody's spoken.
supposed to, right?
Right.
Like, how am I supposed to know? How is he supposed to know that like I wanted X? I don't know. Like, oh, I really am in the mood for an apple. I don't know.
Right.
Like,
Right.
how is he supposed to know? How am I supposed to know? Like, again, like this whole concept that like, what do you mean? But you've been together for so long. Shouldn't you just know each other? No,
No.
you
No.
never fully, you can't live in that person's head.
No.
You never fully 150,000% know someone. I don't even think you know someone. I mean, I've never had this conversation. I know she would probably say that she learns new things every day. I'm thinking my mother-in-law, my in-laws are married for almost 50 years. And I think
120?
my mother-in-law would say that like, yeah, there are definitely things I learned about, you know,
Of
your
course.
father.
Because
Yeah, I
life
mean,
happens. Life
right,
happens and it brings out another part of that person always.
right. So I think that's another thing that people need to understand in dating or in early marriage. The person that you married or are dating, that's going to change and ebb and flow.
Absolutely.
Like so be prepared for that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like the same, and I've said this before also, like a lot, I'm sure you see this too because you're dealing with singles, but like these people, men or women, come with like a checklist. Like, here's my checklist. This is what I need in a
Yeah.
partner, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But then like you get married, let's say, or you're dating for a few years, let's say. Shouldn't those check boxes like move and shift and change as you grow, as you get
100%.
more mature? Right. So
Your needs
that's
change, their needs change. So
exactly.
yeah, let's have a conversation about it.
Right, exactly. Once kids are involved, things change. Like there's so many, it's like there's too many variables to walk into a marriage. I think there's basic expectations obviously of what you should expect in a marriage, I guess.
Right.
But I don't
Values.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask you this though. You mentioned something which is so important. This is something I'm finding a lot because I talk to women who are married. I don't just mentor the singles, although that is a big part of, my one-on-one therapy that I offer. But let me ask you this. What happens, and I put it out on the table because you do have this. Women are like, okay, I'm going to sit with my husband at the right time. I've checked, all the areas, the kids, this, that, the other. He's had his food. It hasn't been a stressful day. There are no
Like it's prime circumstances for a conversation. I get it.
right, right. And we can sit down and we can have a conversation and he can't hear it. He can't bear it. I'm saying it in the most loving way, not in the you, but in the I language. Remember, yeah, we know
Mhm.
all those tricks and yet, and we candy code it, right? Good, rebuke, good. We've got all those, and and again, it could be the woman, it could be the man. I also am speaking in the woman language because also I do have more women. What do you do then? Is that a sign? Is that a sign that when you're saying something to somebody and they're like, either they brush it off or they say you're making, a mountain
A mountain of
out of nothing, right?
yeah, a
Or,
molehill.
it's from your childhood. It's because of your childhood. It's because you had a mother like this, you had a father like that, and that's why you can't accept it, da, 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 or you don't see it, or blah, 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 blah. What do you do then? Is that a sign?
So is it with everything, every conversation or specific conversations?
Probably most of the women that I speak to in their marriage, mainly about the kids, chinuch yeladim, when, that you're spoiling them. You should be this. right? That's the communicate. And, or just in general, the man will say, but you do this to me. And the woman will say, but I'm really not, or I need this. And he'll be like, but I'm doing it for you. There's this, this
Push
push.
pull. I don't know if it's a sign to like get divorced or separate, but I think it's definitely a little bit of a flag. So it's interesting because you mentioned upbringing, which like bringing up kids. So I always tell this to parents because it's the truth.
Hmm.
The way that your kids develop relationships is they develop a relationship with mom, a relationship with dad, and then a relationship with you guys as their parents. So I'm very, very much of the theory
Hmm.
that when it comes to the individual relationships, meaning my relationships with my children versus my husband's, I stay out of that. I don't,
Into,
yeah, when it comes to decisions we have to make as their parents, obviously we're a team, and obviously my kids know we're a team. They still try to play. I mean, I have 10 children, so they still try to play the games of like, what do you mean? I asked Abba and he said yes. I'm like, okay, guys, like, you know the rules in this house. Like, you ask Abba and mommy. You don't just ask Abba because you know he's going to say yes.
right,
And you don't just ask me because you know I'm going to say yes. Like, we're not playing that game. It's very easy for them to manipulate. But
right,
if I'm going to challenge, let's say, my husband's relationship with one of my daughters, it's not something I'll ever do in front of her. It's a conversation we'll have behind closed doors. Well, I'll say, listen, like, I noticed how you spoke to X child, and I feel like you could be doing it differently. And same for me, by the way. Like, he'll very much, again, not in front of the kids, behind closed doors, say to me,
yes,
like, because we have two boys, eight girls. So it's with my boys, I have a really hard time. I have no brothers. I don't come from a boy house. I have two sisters. Like,
wow,
it's hard for me. Yeah. So there are times where he'll tell me like, listen, like, I think you could be doing it this way. And it's too frustrating for me. So I'll be like, listen, you know what? I'm handing it off to you because I don't think I can navigate this. And I think that's perfectly fine and healthy too. I think there is a world where there's a reason why your children have the two parents they have. You're supposed to be able to balance each other.
right,
So that being said, like, again, I don't challenge my husband's relationship with my kids. He doesn't challenge my relationships with them in front of them. He'll challenge them behind closed doors because we live together. He sees things, and we do want listen, of course, I'm going to make mistakes. He's going to make mistakes, whatever. And then there's the relationship that we built with them as their parents. So
right,
but again, if you're in a situation where every single conversation seems to be deflected back on you
right.
by your spouse, there's definitely something there. Whether it be that your spouse is avoidant, that's a big one.
Mm, mm,
I see that. I'll be honest with you. I see that more in men than women. Maybe I'll get heat for that. I don't know. It's just what I see. That
right.
a lot of times, especially when it comes to emotional or relationship based questions or conversations, men are very avoidant, like to the point where they're just like, I like, hand to the
The
face, like,
defense, right?
I can't,
The
yeah, like, I
defense,
can't do this with you. I don't know.
right.
But and yeah, I think it's more they don't know how sometimes,
Men
or they
don't
feel like,
cry. Men don't feel their their
right, and they
emotions.
feel like
Man
there's a
has to be a
certain level
man.
of like pride there that like,
100%.
I'm not gonna even for guys that are super smart, they're like, no, but my wife is smarter than me in this, and I can't have this conversation with her because she's gonna like beat me almost. But like, but if you ask them that, like beat them, you know what I mean? I don't mean beat them like hit them. I mean beat them like they
Right.
win,
I
you
know
lose
what you
type.
mean. Of
Yeah,
course, of
like my
course.
wife's gonna win, I'm gonna lose because she's more emotionally connected to herself.
Right.
But that's not necessarily the reality. I have seen that though, where men are like, they don't want to have to be the quote unquote weaker one in a conversation, so they'll just shut the conversation down completely.
100%.
So I do think
100%.
it's a sign that we need to have a bigger conversation, potentially get help from somebody like you or somebody like me or somebody that a Rav even or a mentor, like, because again, this I also say, no matter how many letters you have before or after your name and how much training you have, it doesn't necessarily make you good at this
Right.
at all. It's very much a
100%.
personality thing, very, very much. Unless you're
Right.
going into like research, like, okay, fine, maybe you'll be a better researcher, no problem. But when you have to deal with other human beings and you don't have that, um, I'm thinking the word gift, but I'm thinking like spark, like it's not something that you're good at, interpersonal
Mm,
relationships for yourself, like in life, then whatever. So that's why I always tell people like go to who you feel comfortable. You know what I'm saying? And if there's a rub that you guys can both sit with and he's not necessarily a therapist but can help you navigate, great. I don't care.
Right. So
Go
that
for
brings
it.
me to that brings to the last question because I know we're almost at the end. I
Hmm.
feel like we could talk about this forever. What happens? Okay, so the woman, the man, either one of them feel like my communication is not something is broken in the communication pathway, and I'm trying to explain, and I'm simply not happy. I want to go to therapy. I want to see a Rebbitzin. We need help.
Guidance.
And
Right.
the other one shut down, says, no, you go. I'm not going. What is that other spouse supposed to do? Like they're literally now they're grappling. So yes, they can go for therapy and absolutely they should go for therapy. But what would you suggest doing then? Because oftentimes that includes silent suffering. And then one person goes to therapy and one of the spouses goes to therapy, continues to work on themselves, works and really tries and carries the burden of the other because the other is like, no, there's no issue with me. You're the issue. I'm not going to see anybody. And even if they do, they many times don't even listen to the advice. It didn't work. It doesn't work, so on and so forth. They don't apply it. Is that a sign? Would that be, because that's silent suffering, the other spouse not willing to, get help.
So I've gotten this a tremendous amount, like a
Yes, same here.
shocking,
Same
shocking
here.
amount. And a lot of times I'll tell, and sometimes it's the man and sometimes it's the woman. It's not always the
Yes,
woman. I'll
100%.
say, you start coming, and I do this, it's a little manipulative tactic, but I do it. You start coming, and your spouse will see positive change. And then we'll ask them to come to a session and we'll talk
Hmm.
about how they could be helpful to you. Not necessarily how they could work on themselves just yet.
Does that work?
It does.
It really does.
For me, it does. Once they see that,
Hmm.
like, I'm like just like a normal person. I don't know. I don't know why people view me as this necessarily this like scary. I don't know. I don't know what it, or I'm gonna be judgmental, or I don't know what it is, because it
Right,
happens to be like I leave all my personal feelings about every single thing in my life, like meaning personal, not in my life, personal opinions about how I feel about certain things, like out the door. Like I'm not sitting like I don't bring in like my political views, my religious views, like none of that, unless the client, politically for sure not, but religiously, like I always tell my clients, like if you're not into that, I can leave my bag of Jewishness outside. It's okay. Like I'm really okay. You know what I mean? Like I'm okay with that. Like clearly I identify as a firm Orthodox woman, but if that's
right,
not what you want, you need the clinical side of things completely and do not want to discuss the Jewish side or the halachic side of things. I'm okay with that. Meaning
right,
I'm here for you in the way that you need. That's the bottom line as a couple.
right, right.
So that has worked for me, where I've worked with one partner and the other partner has seen significant growth. And then I
Mm,
call in the other partner just to like kind of get their opinion. Sometimes we do it together, like the three of us. Sometimes I do it alone, just to be like, can you give me progress? Let me know how the person is doing, et cetera, et
right.
cetera.
And what
What
if
would
the other
you?
side really just doesn't want to come? I'm sure you've had cases like that.
I've only had like one.
Wow,
Like
amazing.
so few. Yeah, I've had so few where I can't get the both partners in the door, because typically by the time they get to me, they're like, we need to make change right now, like we're desperate for change. There's only one other therapist that when I can't deal with the case, I send them to him, because I'm like, it's too, like sometimes these cases end up being like too, thinking the word hot, but like too like combative and
Intense,
like,
right,
yeah, and
right.
like
Too
I don't
intense.
I don't yeah, like that, then like that's to me, not every time, but to me that's kind of out of my jurisdiction, in terms of my clinical lens of what I feel comfortable dealing with. There are
Right,
therapists that specialize in
right,
highly conflict, that's the word, high conflict couples, and that's what they do all day. I'll take on a few of those because I do okay with them, but like sometimes it's like, okay, like one of this, like
right.
happens to be, I have one now, like one of the spouses like so out to lunch in
Mm,
terms of the way to treat other human beings, like not just their spouse,
yeah,
like just
right,
like period in life, that it's like even I'll get combativeness from this person, and I'm like, I'm the therapist, like I'm not your spouse, like I'm not here to deal with your like mishigasim and like, so like,
right.
you know what I mean? And again, so there are, so I don't even remember the initial question we've been talking about.
Whether or not, whether if one person wants and one person doesn't want
So I
to
listen,
coach.
for me, I've had very, very few cases where um I couldn't get both partners in. But that being said, listen, I do think it gets to a point where if one partner is working so hard, the other one is completely out to lunch, not working, they're going to come to their partner and be like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done.
Burnout, right?
Yeah. Like either come to therapy with me, meet with my therapist, or find your own help. Or then we need
Right,
to figure out a way to amicably separate where we can both be happy and live our lives because this is not working.
right. 100%.
And I hate to use that. Like that's a very, very last resort for me to tell a client,
Right,
like, you know,
right.
but
100%.
if that's what's going to get them to therapy to get them the help they need. And a lot of times these things, like you mentioned before, like are childhood ingrained things or learned behaviors that they've seen from their parents or other things that have literally nothing to do with the actual marriage.
Right.
Or it's things that one spouse just, I don't know, like it steps on an old wound
Right.
or a trigger.
And if they're fixated on it, right?
Exactly. And that's it, you know?
Right.
But yeah, I
100%.
think we're seeing a lot of similar things.
Yeah, yeah, and I
Hmm.
do believe this is I think we're in an era of self-awareness, joint awareness, God awareness for sure. And there's a lot of going into the inner world. I feel like there's a lot more going into the inner world. And again, lahan or lahan, like it could be a beautiful opening for a person. On the other hand, sometimes that inner introspection of where we are holding could sometimes have a person bring up all these different ideas of like, is this even right for me? And again, I do, my opinion is this: before anybody makes any move, you got to have a third party involved. You need to have a reflection of an objective perspective to really shed light on it before any step is made here or there.
Hmm.
That's where I hold, and that's why I think therapy is important and not AI. I'm sorry, like AI could be
Right.
really
No, I'm just
amazing.
saying that AI might know more about Torah than a non-Jewish
A
therapist.
100%. No, I got that. I
Yeah,
totally get that.
but not
But
AI. Yeah, no.
I'm saying it here because again, I'm finding as I'm in the community and speaking to other therapists and leaders and, healing experts, I'm seeing more and more of them saying that less and less people are coming to them because more and more people are relying on this type of therapy, which really is not, it's not a go-to.
Mm-mm.
It could shed light on certain areas, maybe,
Right.
but
But
as
then
of
I feel like in that case, like, let's say, what would I use AI for? Give me a list
work,
of, I don't want to open up my DSM. Like, I don't want to open up the diagnostic criteria book for X disorder. Give me layman's terms for borderline personality disorder and what are their criteria? Because that's also been an issue where like people just throw around like, oh, this
yes.
one's a narcissist, this one has borderline, this one has that.
Right.
So that's something that chat is for me or whatever AI is good for because
Right.
it gives me like layman's terms for me to explain to everyday people
Yes.
what something is in a very clear and concrete way. But
Yes.
otherwise, yeah, I don't. It's
Right. For technical stuff, for just
exactly
coming up with ideas, for just understanding certain concepts, very abstract ideas. For
right.
something intimate and emotional and deep
Mm-mm.
and life deciding, I am not going to let AI into my life. It's
I
like
hear
I don't use social media for my private life either. I'm not going to post it. It's none of anybody. Honestly, here and there, there's a picture here, but really, like social media is for me not social. It's really about
right. I use it
communicating
mostly for
certain
work
ideas.
also. Yeah.
Again, so to each his own. Again, to each his own. But
Hmm.
I really I feel like today's conversation really brought to light, first of all, the idea that relationships are complex because human beings are complex. And I feel like we touched upon like certain moments of awareness. We came to places of a lot of emotional honesty and responsibility. And I do feel like the most important idea here is understanding the difference of when we should be looking out for certain pinpoints, I want to say, or signal points. When can we grow from it? When could we recognize that maybe, again, I'm sure that this conversation can go on for hours. When are there really signs that it could cause further harm? And there's a lot more to explore here. And I want to urge everyone here that if you're struggling, don't struggle alone. And I really like what you said, Dr. Lauren. Just come into the therapist, you yourself, whether you're the wife or the husband, go into therapy you on your own so that you can better be equipped on how to deal with the conflict at hand. Don't suffer silently alone, because that's where there's such a destruction of your inner mechanism, and you don't have to do that, right?
Right.
I'm sure.
Correct. Yeah.
So thank you, Dr. Lauren. I have to say, you have brought a tremendous amount of wisdom, balance, compassion, maturity into the conversation. It was such a pleasure. Like I said, I can sit here for
Thank you.
hours on a cup of coffee. Please share with our listeners how they can reach out to you, and how do you work, and where can they find you?
Okay, so you can find me on Instagram at the Orthodox Therapist, or you can send us an email, hello@orthodoxtherapist.com, with any questions, or if you're interested in a consultation. And yeah, that's how you find
Amazing.
me.
Amazing, amazing. Well, I follow you, and I love your reels and your clips and your
Thank you.
wisdom, and keep shedding light onto the world, and bringing all this awareness and sweetness into relationships and to understanding mental health. Thank you so much. You continue
My
to be
pleasure.
blessed.
Amen. Thank
Really,
you.
thank you so much. And to our listeners, please stay tuned for further Or Talk conversations. I'm really looking forward to sharing this precious time. Have a great day. Thank you so much.